Thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me today.
How does produce like onions and carrots, and even a few years ago, I think it was lettuce, how do those items become tainted?
That's a good question. Produce can become contaminated in multiple ways, from contaminated irrigation water and farm machinery to directly from animals and their waste.
And is there any way to prevent that contamination?
There are a lot of things that we've put in place to prevent that kind of contamination, and things are checked for, but as we can see, sometimes things still do happen.
And sometimes, speaking of sometimes, that contamination can lead to foodborne illnesses, which we've seen recently. If people who consume those contaminated foods, what are some of the signs and symptoms of maybe, let's say, E. coli, if someone has consumed tainted onions or carrots or something of the like?
Yeah, the signs and symptoms of E. coli are going to be very similar to a lot of other foodborne illnesses. So, unfortunately, people are going to experience upset stomach, vomiting, diarrhea, things of that nature are very likely.
And when should people get checked? When does it become severe?
You know, that's something that is really a question for their medical professionals. So, if someone is concerned about how they're progressing, then definitely contact your doctor.
You know, the holidays are coming up and there will be a lot of gatherings around food. How can people ensure that the food they are serving and that they are consuming is safe?
Some of the best ways to ensure food safety at home are utilizing the 4 steps to food safety: the clean, separate, cook, and chill. So we're talking about washing your hands correctly and washing surfaces often when you're preparing food, separating raw meat, chicken, and other poultry, things like seafood and eggs. Keep those away from ready-to-eat foods. Cook foods to the proper temperature. The only way to ensure that food is cooked to a minimum safe temperature is to use a kitchen thermometer.
Would you
And
recommend?
then
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, and then just make sure to refrigerate that food promptly.
And so, you know, is this an old wives' tale, or is there some truth to this that you can't put food in the refrigerator if it's too warm, or can you put it in there shortly after you've served it?
You know, that is a really good question. So it kind of depends on how much food you're putting into the refrigerator and how warm it is. So if there's a relatively small amount of food compared to the size of your refrigerator, then putting it in the refrigerator while it's still a little warm is fine. But if you have like a lot of food, say you've made a big chili, maybe the best way is to cool that down first by using ice or putting it into different containers, something like that.
And I mentioned Thanksgiving is coming up next week. A lot of people will be preparing the turkeys. Another question that people have a lot of times is, does the stuffing or dressing go inside the turkey, or should you prepare that in a separate dish?
You know, that is a really good question. That comes up often. And it turns out that the recommendations are to not cook that stuffing inside the turkey any longer. So cook that into a separate dish.
Okay, so it makes no difference what grandma did in 1970. In 2024, do not cook it inside the bird.
Yeah, so our knowledge of things has changed since then.
Dr. Wade Sayers, thanks so much for joining us, food safety specialist from MSU Extension. Thank you for being here today. Wishing you a great holiday season.
All right, you too. Thank you.
Thank you.